conferences. And then we'll close with making connections to our high school success eligibility. So let's see. So before we move into the strategies, just again, doing a really quick refresher on our goals for today and the pillars of culturally responsive teaching. And so our goals are to support students whose lived experiences are shaped by multiple and intersecting identities, and to recognize family as essential partners in their children's education. And so in order to achieve these goals, we will pull from the principles of culturally responsive teaching. These pillars intersect. They're not chronological, nor do they follow sequence, but you'll see how they really integrate and work, leveraging each other. So starting with family involvement, it means to encompass the active participation of families, such as attending parent-teacher conferences, participating in school events, assisting with homework, and engaging in conversations about students' academic progress. Community culture in the classroom connects learning to students' identities, their experiences, and communities, emphasizing that students learn best when their cultural backgrounds are recognized as assets. Understanding history and culture allows us to build bridges between students, families, and their learning at school. And bringing native language into the classroom. This allows students to use their full linguistic resources to understand content, express ideas, and participate in learning. These practices are centered in equity and anti-racist principles, ensuring that students and families' lived experiences, their language, and their cultural knowledge are valued as assets. The principles approach is a constructivist approach, really drawing on the prior experience of students' lived experience and their cultural background. All right, so we're going to jump into implementation here. Culturally responsive teaching is an approach that acknowledges and honors diversity in racial, ethnic, linguistic, and cultural backgrounds. Research shows that culturally responsive teaching promotes an inclusive pedagogy that empowers all students at intellectual, social, and emotional levels, while at the same time, it broadens educators' knowledge and pedagogy around equity perspectives. And so the significance of culturally responsive teaching in today's classroom really goes beyond including students' first language or celebrating holidays and traditions related to their culture. Instead, it involves tailored instruction aimed at fostering the growth and success of all students within a culturally responsive environment. So in the following slide, I'm going to share some strategies and we'll go deeper into the implementation of 2 of those strategies. I did share this earlier. It is a non-exhaustive list of strategies that educators can use in the classroom. On the left, it lists culturally responsive teaching strategies. So interviewing students, integrating, let me move the slide for you, learning about students, integrating relevant world issues, experimenting with peer teaching, KWL charts, and then on the right, we have funds of knowledge. In the first session, we kind of went more in depth into funds of knowledge. And funds of knowledge refers to the wealth of cultural, linguistic, and experiential knowledge that students bring with them from their homes and their communities. And it can be leveraged by using activities such as storytelling or oral histories, identity-based text, and literature that challenges stereotypes about students, cultures, and communities. Counter stories. And so the ones that are circled are the ones that we're going to be digging into today to discuss implementation. We're going to do 2. These are both circled because there's an overlap between the funds of knowledge and culturally responsive teaching. So the first strategy we'll take a deeper dive with is storytelling. And so as we move through the strategies, we'll start with the description of the activity, and then we'll talk about the benefits of the strategy, and then some caution to take in our implementation. And so storytelling is intentionally incorporating students' personal narratives into classroom instruction. It has emerged as a powerful approach for empowering students' storytelling. Storytelling can be integrated across multiple subjects. It could be used in reading, writing, language arts, social studies, and it encourages students to take their own stories and stories from their culture and background through oral or written formats. The benefits of storytelling and this strategy is to foster meaningful and engagement, and it affirms students' identities. This practice allows students to see themselves reflected in the curriculum and reinforces their sense of belonging as valued members of the school community. It supports students in building their identity by giving them space to share their culture and experiences. It also encourages meaningful connections among students and also the wider community at large, in creating a more inclusive environment. When we think about the implementation of storytelling, and the way that we approach this strategy, it should be approached with caution. The activity should be implemented with care and respect, and with cultural sensitivity. It is essential to create a safe and inclusive environment where students' identities are honored authentically. We must be mindful to avoid tokenizing students or reinforcing stereotypes based on cultural backgrounds. Instead, encouraging genuine representation, thoughtful dialogue, and mutual respect amongst learners. So when we think about the implementation, we can acknowledge that many cultures have oral traditions, myths, and stories that are passed down through generations. And depending on the grade band, these stories can be used as teaching tools, maybe about manners, morality, policies, many things. And so we can use our students' diverse cultural stories to teach valuable lessons in the classroom while also sharing some unique history of other groups. And when choosing to implement storytelling, it's important to start by explaining what storytelling is and why it matters in honoring Native languages and cultures. We want to encourage students to share their personal stories and cultural anecdotes, and we might choose to model what this looks like for them. And then we can work to create spaces where we invite storytelling sessions where students can share their stories with peers, either through partner share or group share, maybe even eventually working up to classroom share. And while this takes place, we need to be ready to offer help and encouragement for students who may feel unsure or uncomfortable about sharing their stories. So that include ways to really affirm them and validate their experiences and their identities. And knowing that storytelling helps students feel included and to understand who they are, we'll want to think about what we're hearing from the stories and how we can continue to integrate them into classroom lessons. And so when we're building that reciprocity, it helps it builds trust in the classroom, and it helps students be more open to sharing. If I share a cultural story, um, and then I just share, and then it just kind of stays there, then I'm not really sure why I'm doing it. But if I share a story and then I see it come up in a different space or a reference to it, then I'm like, oh, wow, like this is how I contributed. And so that's part of creating that environment and that atmosphere where we're more open to sharing, and it builds more of that reciprocal relationship. So I'm going to take a pause and then ask if there's any specific questions, thoughts, ideas, or anything about this specific strategy before I move on to the next one. Has anybody incorporated storytelling in their lessons so far?
I'm gonna share. I'm coming off mute because it'll take me too long to share in the chat, but this is Margaret Colas from Lake County. But back in the day when I was in the classroom teaching, and I was teaching in high school English, and we were studying out of our literature book, just a story about biracial people, and we invited conversation. I was living in an area where we had a large Native American population, along with Hispanic and then Caucasian. So we had some families where the parents, like mom would be one race, the dad would be different. And just there was a rich conversation about what that felt like, and that just the disconnectedness between I don't know which one I belong to, and then families sometimes not seeing or not being appreciative of the other side of the family's culture. And it just opened up a dialogue that we were able to build on as we continued to move. And these are kids in a rural area, so they know each other, but it was, as a high school classroom, it just allowed them to go to a deeper level, experiencing some of those areas of identity, and build the first student who was brave enough to speak out about it was then willing to share more and engage his classmates in it. It was really beautiful, and it just opened my eyes to a perspective I hadn't really considered before, being just of one culture. That is all.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm so grateful for your share, Margaret. It's perfect. It's like all of the components, everything that we're talking about supporting their their intersecting identities. Everything is just coming to life in what you shared. So I'm really grateful for that share. Thank you so much. All right. Well, I'm going to move us on to the next strategy, and that's cultural knowledge interviews. And so these interviews are intended to help us identify students' funds of knowledge so we can incorporate them into our lessons. And so the strategy involves structured, student-centered interviews designed to explore students' cultural backgrounds, their lived experiences, and all the perspectives that they bring into the classroom. And through the use of open-ended questions and intentional active listening, we as educators invite students to share their cultural heritage, their language experiences, their family traditions, their stories, and their personal interests. But it's done in a more intimate level, not in a whole class. So hopefully it feels less risky. Um, and these conversations provide us with valuable insights into students' cultural identity, and it really helps foster mutual understanding, respect, and trust. So the interviews should be grounded in cultural responsive approaches that allow students to share their cultural knowledge and experiences, fostering a sense of belonging and affirming their identities within the school community. Um, at the same time, educators, we gain a deeper insight, just like the share that we heard right now from Margaret, right? It's that deeper insight into the students' backgrounds. And this enables us to develop more culturally responsive and sustaining instructional practices. The approach supports equity, promotes inclusion in our learning environments, and contributes to positive systemic change in our education system. And so the implementation, however, we do want to approach the strategy with caution. It is essential to avoid assumptions or stereotypes related to students' cultural backgrounds, as these can compromise trust and rapport between educators and students. Interviews should be conducted in a manner that respects students' cultural autonomy and ensuring participation is voluntary and confidentiality is maintained. By engaging in dialogue, both parties will foster mutual understanding and respect, building meaningful connections that really transcend cultural barriers. Adopting a personal, student-centered approach to build meaningful connections early in the school year will be critical, beginning with face-to-face interactions to foster open dialogue, allowing students to share their interests, favorite subjects, preferred learning activities, and complementing these conversations with optional interviews um, that will allow for us to gather deeper information about students' backgrounds and their learning styles can then be incorporated. So this will help us as educators gain a more comprehensive understanding of the of who we are in the classroom as a whole by really being able to look at the individuals and then being able to tailor instruction and creates methods to engage and create more inclusive environments. And so when we were thinking about this, we did talk about like, oh, it starts from the beginning of the year where we're building out those face-to-face, but we're actually ready to implement cultural knowledge interviews. We do want to think about the environment where we're doing it. If we think back to the first session, our positionality, like what does this look like? Am I sitting in the front of the room and they're sitting in the desk, right? So we want to make it like it's light, it's welcoming, it's authentic. And so what does the space look like? And then also the participation should always be voluntary. And then during the interviews, we want to use thoughtful and open-ended questions. Um, and as we're engaging with the interviews, ensuring that we're showing our sincere interest and our respect for what we're hearing. And then after the interview, really analyzing the insights gained and thinking about how they can be applied to enhance classroom practices. And so when we talk about cultural interviews, this doesn't mean that I'm going to interview every single student in the class on one day or anything like that. And so I might just choose a couple, and there might be a reason why I'm choosing those students, or I might choose to do everybody, but they're like staggered. Maybe I'm doing a few every month, and so the implementation is going to be kind of tailored to what you're hoping to change and shift within the culture of your classroom. I have some questions that I'm going to drop in the chat. They're like example interview questions. They're very, very much a starting point. But when we're talking about like, well, where do I start? What do I do? Um, again, these are just very much like a starting place to help generate ideas. And then based on your context, based on where you are in your classroom and how you're hoping to leverage this strategy, will kind of determine how you alter these. So, for example, when we're talking about what interests you about school, maybe if you know they're part of like of the football team. You might tailor that to tell me what interests you about football, or if they're participating in a different club or community group outside of the school, or if they have a job, what interests you about your work, volunteering, at the local animal shelter. I'm just making things up, but so again, these are just intended to be like a starting point that can kind of help then branch out to like more specific content within your school and your classroom. Um, on the next slide, I'm going to go through some like considerations for these strategies that are more aimed at culturally responsive teaching. But before we do that, I'm just again just going to pause and ask if there's any questions, clarifications, anything that's coming up for people as we're talking about cultural knowledge interviews. Has anybody done these interviews? They can, some people might call them empathy interviews. They're similar to empathy interviews, but they have the specific focus on really understanding that cultural background. And so I'll just give some wait time to see if anybody might be better to unmute than to put it in the chat.
Gloria, nobody else has anything to say. I'll share a little twist on that.
Yeah.
Maybe a way to get it started. Something that Stanfield did this fall was kind of reimagine how they do their open house in an effort to build relationships with their families. And so they did a couple things. They they made it longer to kind of accommodate the shift work that a lot of their families do. They invited the entire family and provided food trucks so they could feed everybody. But the really fun thing they did is they kind of flipped the script, and they each staff member in the district created sort of a science fair board about themselves to introduce themselves to their family. And then it just kind of created this dialogue and built safety to do the same kind of thing that you're talking about. And it was really powerful, and they were really thrilled with how well it went. So wanted to share that.
That's really exciting. I would have loved to be there, Jennifer. I really love how the approach was really to navigate those barriers that have maybe been seen. And so if we know time is a barrier, and so rather than sticking to the same, I don't know, 2 hours that we always do, I'm just throwing a number out there, we've extended that. So we've made that more accessible for people. I know a lot of times I work till late and then I go drop off my daughter to dance. And then it's like, when is there time to eat? When do I eat? And so if I'm running from work and then to the conferences, being able to provide people with meals, that's amazing. Um, and what's interesting is that you're talking about these conferences. We'll be digging into in the next section here when we're talking about family involvement strategies, where it is really flipping the script, where it's not come to this conference and let me tell you about your student, but rather like I want to hear from you. And so it's a different component. It's like shifting the mindset on how we have maybe offered conferences in the past. So in this case, this is like, let me show you who I am. And that's great. So that was really exciting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Also helped the teachers understand what it felt like to be in the shoes of the person kind of being interviewed and opening up.
Mhm.
It's built a lot of trust. It's fun.
Absolutely. I love these shares because as I'm presenting on all these, I'm seeing all the connections that we're talking about the dual capacity, right? Where we're both learning. This isn't one-sided. It's not one person leading or one-sided leading. And so thank you. I'm really enjoying hearing these strategies that are happening. Um, I'll move us. Not seeing anybody else unmute. But these are considerations to the strategies that I just shared, and really just thinking about culturally responsive practices and funds of knowledge, the considerations that we want to have in our implementation. When implementing culturally responsive strategies that dig into personal story or life experiences, there needs to be a level of caution and consideration. This is why, for those that attended part 1 of this session, it's the reason why we opened up with reflecting on our positionality and our intersecting identities. Understanding our positionality and how our power and privilege may be perceived by our students is important when creating a plan to implement these strategies. This includes reflecting on equity-centered practices and examining potential barriers to students' access and their participation. And so when developing and implementing instructional plans, we should consider both topic-specific requirements and just broader guiding considerations for supporting the effective implementation. So these questions on the screen are to kind of help ground and guide us in best practices to assist us and school leaders in guiding the internal design and implementation of these strategies to foster more culturally responsive teaching. And by grounding implementation in these considerations, we as educators can help promote more inclusive, equitable learning environments and increase the likelihood of successful outcomes. And so those are some questions I bolded too. How can I adapt practices to be more culturally responsive for students, ensuring that the content materials include a variety of perspectives that value and resonate with their cultural backgrounds? And how can I, as an educator, go beyond surface level cultural celebrations to foster a deeper sense of belonging for students within my classroom, considering their unique linguistic and cultural identities? I'll pause and see if this kind of stirs anything up for you. I will, if not, I can share a funny little story. It's funny now, because I'm an adult, but really leaning into that third question, going beyond surface level cultural celebrations. When I was in first grade, this was a long time ago. This was about 30 years ago. I was in a like mostly white dominant school, and I was probably one of only a handful of students that spoke Spanish as a primary language. And I remember this. It was really funny. My first grade teacher, who was trying to be like, I think, culturally responsive and inclusive, said to me, Feliz, Feliz Cinco de Mayo. And I just like stared at him and smiled. And then the student that was like sitting next to me was like, what did he say? And I'm like, he said Happy Cinco de Mayo. And I went home and I asked my mom, ¿Qué es Cinco de Mayo? Because we don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo. It's not our independence. Some people sometimes think it's our independence. And so it was just really funny that like we need to like understand and we didn't know. And sometimes when we're doing things like our intent is there, but like the impact is different. And so that was an experience that I had that was really interesting. I learned what Cinco de Mayo was, though. Guess that prompted that learning for me. All right, so I'll move us on to family involvement. And so we're going to jump into some strategies for family involvement. So these strategies are going to move beyond the classroom to really also include our school systems as well. They are also inclusive of the classroom as well, but we're thinking broader. And so, as we stated earlier, there's endless research that consistently shows that family involvement is one of the strongest predictors of student success. And we know that family involvement is most effective when it's culturally and linguistically affirming and sustained. So we want to ensure that we create spaces where families feel safe and welcomed and empowered to participate fully in their children's education. where we invite their cultural wisdom so that they are co-creators and not just recipients of the education system. This will really help foster long-term relationships and diverse and strengthen the diverse and linguistic identities in our students and families. Again, just sharing this non-exhaustive list of family engagement strategies. The ones that are highlighted are the ones that we're going to move through today. The first strategy is family education partnerships. And the aim of this strategy is to establish a shared decision-making approach that actively includes families as equal partners in their children's education. This strategy prioritizes ongoing two-way communication, transparent sharing of information, and intentional opportunities for family voice in the planning of their students' education and goal setting. By honoring families' knowledge and cultural perspectives and aspirations for their students' education. Educators collaboratively can develop instructional decisions that reflect that shared responsibilities. And so this approach is meant to strengthen, again, both the educators and the families by building skills, trust, and confidence, that mutual confidence. It fosters authentic relationships and helps lead more informed and culturally responsive instructional choices, linking family engagement directly to student learning. This promotes students benefiting from instruction that is better aligned with their strengths, with their needs, and their lived experiences. Additionally, the long-term collaboration ensures systemic supports are in place, resulting in empowering families and equipping educators to help improve student outcomes. While this strategy supports meaningful family educator partnerships, its success really does depend on the intentional and context-sensitive implementation. Effective engagement requires addressing participation barriers. So kind of what we heard from Jennifer earlier, fostering equity and cultural responsiveness, and ensuring organizational support. Building capacity, trust, and relationship takes time, and clear goals and evaluation is essential to avoid tokenism. We as educators should approach shared decision-making with cultural humility, with accessibility, and maintaining confidentiality to ensure authentic and ethical and sustainable family and school collaborations. So our implementation steps for this strategy are to assess the current engagement practices, to identify where you have strengths in your systems, where there are gaps, and then gathering input and input from families and staff. So we'll need to secure leadership commitment, ensuring there's resource allocation and there's systemic structures built out to sustain engagement, as well as providing professional development for educators on family partnerships, cultural responsiveness, and collaborative decision-making. We will need to strengthen skills and knowledge and confidence for both educators and families to engage effectively. And so what does this look like? We want to equip educators with skills to communicate effectively, to collaborate with families, and use culturally responsive strategies. And we also want to support families in understanding curricula and how to navigate the school system and how to participate meaningfully in decisions. So it's about fostering confidence, knowledge, and relationships on both sides. So we'll need to design culturally relevant and accessible engagement strategies that purposefully connect to student outcomes by incorporating families' input into goal setting, instructional planning, and shared decision making. Developing ongoing two-way communication by using multiple channels to share information, gathering feedback, and fostering that continuous dialogue to help inform and improve practices. And to ensure we're on the right path, regularly connecting and analyzing data on participation, outcomes, and satisfaction will be needed to reflect, improve, and adjust practices based on the evidence and feedback. And to sustain family engagement practices, we should embed these into the school and district policies with successful lessons learned and best practices shared across the community to continue to foster them long term and to build resilient partnerships. Jennifer, can you tell me what time the session is over so I can make sure we're on track?
You have 30 more minutes.
Okay, I think
12:30 to 1:45.
Okay, I think we're good on time then. We have one more strategy and then we're going to dig into high school success. So I think we're good on time. Yeah, I just, again, want to invite people as you're thinking about your own implementations. How have you strengthened or what have you done to strengthen the family educator partnerships, either in your classroom or in your school? If anybody would please share what they've done so far. It really supports that two-way. This is actually a really good example of what we would see in the high school success work. And so we can move on and then we can actually think about like, how does this respond to the high school success eligibility? So I think I'll just move us on and then really just think about this strategy as we're thinking about the implementation of that piece. All right, so the second family engagement strategy or family involvement strategy that we'll look at is the family empowerment conferences. And so you shared like a version of what that looked like, or was it Sandfield you said, right, Jennifer?
It was Stanfield, but it wasn't like a traditional parent-teacher conference. It was their beginning of the year open house.
Open house. Okay.
Before the first day of school. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can see themes of it that will show up in this strategy as well. And so that just goes to show you like this is like these can be altered and these can really be shifted to fit the needs. And so parent empowerment conferences are an evidence-based strategy that's designed to promote meaningful family engagement and school decision making. And so the approach centers on creating structured, parent-led spaces where caregivers can share perspectives, build awareness, and collaborate with school representatives, with educators serving as facilitators by engaging parents in committees and partnering with district advocates, schools. They can provide Schools can provide workshops and discussions focused on understanding the education system's parents' rights and responsibilities and strategies to support student success. So the benefits of these are the entire school community benefits from this strategy as it supports system change by addressing language barriers, promoting equitable partnerships among parents and caregivers, while being responsive to the varied needs of the communities. And so if we think about this as what it looks like, when we think about parent empowerment conferences, you can take a typical conference setting and just really flipping it where instead of me telling a parent how their student's doing and what support they need, it's really I'm the facilitator that's creating that space to really learn from them and what can I do? And so it like really kind of flips the script and it really gives them the power. And then we can also just think about different levels and how that can grow out in terms of once we build that trust and that rapport, we can lead up to that level where we're essentially just letting people borrow that space, and we're creating spaces where we just hold the space and parents comes in and they can lead workshops and they can lead discussions and they can lead listening sessions. So really working off the strengths of our communities, and we're doing this together. And so it's kind of what this strategy is kind of aiming to do. And as we approach the strategy, definitely want to approach it with caution. Intentional efforts should be made to avoid tokenism of our communities and to support the continued effectiveness over time. So the implementation for this will kind of phase out into three spaces. So we have before the conference. So before the conference, we want to ensure successful parent-teacher conferences with bilingual families. Before the conferences, we should actively encourage attendance by providing bilingual education, offering childcare when possible, and by making personal contact with families, either by phone number or by in-person invitations, flyers, scheduling specific appointment times and confirming that those times work, ensuring that we are being flexible with their schedule and adjusting our schedule depending on parent availability. Reminder calls will help maximize participation. It's essential to provide qualified interpreters rather than relying on students for interpretation. Coordinating interpreters across classrooms and providing like pre-conference training was also helpful to ensure effectiveness. Ensuring that we're reviewing those like key educational terms to ensure that there's clear communication in our conversations. And during the conference, we want to invite parents to share their experiences for their children's learning. So we want to center time for parent questions and emphasize ongoing communication with bilingual support to ensure parents are feeling informed and engaged. Teachers should speak directly to parents rather than to the interpreters. Information should be present um, at every measure pace, and we need to ensure like the right pace and the right frequency to allow that space for interpretation. Visual supports can also really help clarify explanations when possible, and providing those visuals in translated form when possible. And then after a conference, really trying to reinforce the partnerships between the teachers and parents by sending a thank you note or making a follow-up call that helps express the appreciation for their time, and being able to highlight any positive progress that has taken place since. And this just really helps maintain ongoing communication to strengthen collaboration and support for their children's learning. I'm going to move us for time. And so some considerations when we're talking about family involvement strategies, culturally responsive involvement. We need to ensure that we're moving slow to ensure that we have the highest likelihood of success for our outcomes. Remember that family involvement needs to be intentional. It's not rushed. There needs to be work done to build trust, especially with historically harmed communities. There should be transparency about what we can and what we cannot do. And feedback loops to students and families will be important in shaping that trust. Qualitative feedback can be analyzed and coded. So let me back up. When we receive qualitative feedback through these conferences, that can be analyzed and coded thematically to really help us identify the strengths and then where the challenges are and some of those opportunities that we can move with. And so as we think about these considerations, there are 4 questions that kind of help us move in a space for proper implementation. So are our families' engagement efforts meaningful, culturally responsive, and designed to build real capacity rather than one-off or tokenistic activities? And so you'll continue to see the theme how that the building of capacity, both at the educator level and at the family level, is really central. And the way that we approach and not tokenizing our families is going to be really important in order to build the trust. Do we have organizational supports, leadership commitment, and mechanism for reflection and evaluation needed to sustain and measure the impact of these partnerships? As educators, a lot of the time we only have the control of what we do in our classroom. And so when we're thinking broader level involvement, really thinking about what is leadership supporting and where's the resource allocation. And so these are some of the considerations for our family involvement strategies. And so I think we have like 20 minutes now. And do you want to spend some time on high school success eligibility? For those of you that may not be familiar with this, I'll just give a really brief overview of the high school success eligibilities. So high school success is a program that was passed back like in 2016, I think, for Measure 98. And so the initiative is really aimed at reducing chronic absenteeism, increasing participation and access to advanced courses that offer dual credits. It is related to CTE, and it really works off this framework of being on track, based off of like ninth grade on track. So there's specific indicators that we look at within eligibility to receive funds. And so we moved through a statewide evaluation of different districts in the state. And so far, what we have seen is that many districts are failing to meet the high school success eligibility requirement that require that schools actively involve students' family or their caregivers in graduation planning, course selection, and maintaining a student's education plan and profile. And this also includes helping families understand how to read a transcript. And so this involvement should also be documented with a plan to increase outreach to families who are not yet engaged. And in addition, families do need to have a voice in decisions about advanced and dual credit coursework. And so when we are talking about the implementation of family involvement strategies, the strategies that I shared before, back to it so you could see it. This family educator partnerships really supports the what we're trying to achieve with high school success. And so I'm curious what is coming up for you as I'm sharing kind of what we're seeing with the results of these reviews and some of these strategies, and what are some of the ways that we can kind of make strides towards moving in authentic partnerships with families in this area. I think the one that comes up for me is, I'm going to drop it in the chat for you to have visual as well. For me, it's really understanding that families are partners and experts on their own students and not just recipients of information. And so when we're thinking about creating a collaborative partnership, when we're thinking about the planning, the 4-year plan for students, how are we really involving them in those decisions and not just sharing information during forecasting? Because I get that email, hey, it's forecasting time. But what does that look like to be in partnership?
Gloria,
Yeah.
I'll share a thought that just came up to me here. And James, I see you're here, ag teacher, right? Pretty sure I'm right. Anyway, Hermiston High School started doing this several years ago, trying to get families more involved in understanding the opportunities that CTE programs of study offered. And so they and they've transitioned this over the years, but they created these open houses, again, kind of for forecasting time, especially for the fly up days. And they invited parents to take tours of their CTE programs of study. And they might have included some other electives in it too. I'm not sure. It might have changed over the years. But part of those tours were a real understanding of the sequencing of the courses in the program of study and how it aligned to their community college partner, and then also how it aligned to the different industry and careers that a student could pursue either right after high school or after some post-secondary training. And it was really an opportunity to educate parents. And the other thing that they coupled with that was the graduation course. So recognizing students who had completed a program of study. And I just think that's a really neat way to honor student choices and help parents be a part of their next step planning. And then the other thing that I would just want to mention to this group is U Science, which is a platform that I think Morrow County is using. And if you're not familiar with it yet, you should get familiar because it's so much fun. It's an aptitude assessment, and it also provides you can track your plan and profile in there. There's instructional materials to support the career ed requirements. There's all sorts of research information about careers and post-secondary options related to a student's aptitude and interest. And next year, they are rolling out a parent portal. So parents will have access to see their own students' information. And I just think it's going to be a really, really powerful tool. And I think if you really are interested in it, we're doing a professional development day with our trainer from Salt Lake City on U Science. And if you ask for it in the chat, I'll send you the registration because we'd sure love to have you attend.
That's awesome, Jennifer. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love the invitation for the training, and I'm also curious if the training is going to incorporate ways in which we support families and being able to access that. Because I think it's great to have a portal. And so for folks like myself that I'm used to working virtually, I got to navigate all these systems. I can figure it out. But for families that may not be so proficient in the use of technology, what support do we need to provide for them to have access to this? I don't know if that training that's part of the training, but that'd be a good question to ask.
Will do. Yeah, still don't know what it looks like, but I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Margaret Colis again, from Lake County. So I'm a really big believer in that what we do on our school campuses, so school-wide or district wide needs to reflect um what our student body looks like, right? And so one of the things that uh, was pretty cool, we had a Rubathon. It was sponsored by our STEM hub, and they came down to our middle school, and I was assisting in logistics and being able to help look for different community partners to help judge that event for the middle school students. And just as I was looking around, I was looking for community partners who were going to be representative of the different cultures and ethnicities on our campus, and happened to be able to find a gentleman who is like the manufacturing lead for a door building company. And so along with the owner of the company and this lead manufacturer, um, being able to come and to be there for this, it was important for me, for the kids, speaking of CTE, for the kids to be able to see themselves represented in the people who were coming to have conversations with them about a future in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And I think that's really true also at a at a district level, looking on our school boards and really making a conscientious effort to go out and to seek and find people who are representative of the many different cultures that are living within our community. And I think sometimes I think we can be doing a lot more, especially at the rural level, to be making that happen. And I believe that starts with those relationships we're building on our school campuses with our families, and then that will lead into more of what we're looking for with the high school success eligibility and meeting that requirement, because we're going to be having all of our families feeling like they are part of the conversation. So that's what I wanted to share.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Margaret. Yes, we do want them to feel involved and part of that conversation. And also acknowledging that we will be doing learning alongside them as well. We have a lot to learn from our families. So when in the presentation there, I kind of framed this as like there will be mutual capacity building that needs to happen. And so educators will support families so they can read a transcript, so they can understand the graduation requirements, the forecasting process and all that. And then what that means for their goals and visions and how they're supporting their students' dreams. But then also, we as educators, what are we gaining? And so it is that it is learning like what are like the dreams and the visions that our students families have for them, right? My husband, he's a football coach, and he's been coaching for so many years, like 8 years now, I think, close to 10 years, I don't even know. And so he has so many students, and there's always that one or two student that like just kind of stays, like they just build a strong connection. And so he's been coaching for so many years that they're all like, some of them are adults now. And so I asked him the other day, like, hey, how is this student doing? I haven't heard about him in a while. And he was like, oh, well, he graduated a couple years ago and he has a kid now. And so he's just like, he's being a responsible parent now, and he's working. And I noticed that tone of he's working because we believe in education. We want to see our kids in like trade schools or universities, things like that. And I'm like, oh, what is he doing for work? And he said, oh, he's roofing. And I'm like, well, you know what? That's a great trade. Um, I'm hearing you say like you wish that he would have continued school. I would do more. I'm like, but he's gaining so many skills. They're practical skills. It's the working skills, and he's learning about like responsibility and work ethic. And as he moves on, he's going to continue like maybe how to write a bid, how to do other things, and maybe one day like he'll start his own roofing company, and that'll be really cool. And he's like, yeah, maybe, So I think when we talk to our families, we also learn about the dreams and the visions that they have for their kids. And I think that's really valuable information. So I think as we approach the high school success eligibilities and we can work through the dual capacity framework of noting that it's not only our families that are learning, but it's us that are learning alongside. So we have 5 minutes left, so I'll take us on to the next one. Just there's my email. I would love if you have the need to know more or chat more, if you want to send me an email, I'm happy to travel. I'm happy to visit your school if there's certain implementation efforts that you want to share with me. I would love to be there to support. And so as we're closing, just really thinking about what has this sparked in you? What supports may you need in your implementation? Are there any supports that we can provide here at ODE? Be really, really helpful if maybe one person can unmute and just like tell me how this landed for you. And then we can be done for the day.
Margaret, again, I'm never shy to come off my mute button. I just don't want to hog the conversation. It's landing well. I do have some more specific questions about the high school success and just kind of helping move forward. But I can pause for a little bit and see if anybody else wants to come on and say anything. So I'm going to hold off for just a minute.
Thank you for being here, Christina. All right, Margaret, feel free to jump in.
Okay, thanks. So, in regard to small rural communities, and looking at and my involvement as integrated grants liaison, that's how I'm involved in this high school success and working with Lakeview High School coming up in your visit, but it might be applicable if anybody is still on the call. That is in a small rural area. When in looking at fulfilling this particular metric indicator on the eligibility review, how to be able to present the information um, in a way that it is not coming as a finger pointing, like you're doing this wrong, or as just becoming another like assurance, but being able to really work to help this high school community develop a plan for how to make this an integral important part, because I know that the teachers that I know, the leaders that I know, it is important to them. But then when it's when it's coming across as a metric that we've missed because we haven't focused on it, or I shouldn't I'm saying we, but they haven't focused on it well enough to pass yet in that eligibility review. So what are some of your suggestions in how we can move forward in helping this just not to become symbolic, but really embedded, like you were talking about, whether it's in storytelling or in the interviewing or the family engagement, And it kind of goes along with Jennifer, I think, with her like like what would be the first thing that you would suggest that we go out and do, right? In part one, to be able to like start making this happen, because I feel very strongly that it's very important, but I can see some people becoming defensive, like, oh, it's just one more thing that ODE is telling us that we have to do, and they think we're not doing it well enough, and they don't know because they're not here. And do you understand what I'm saying? I'm just kind of being like pretty
Absolutely.
blunt out
Yeah.
there. No, like
Yeah.
no education ease in the conversation, just my heart to heart about it.
That's a really good question. And I think it's always approaching with humility, just like we're approaching culturally responsive teaching and family involvement strategies with humility. I think it's also the same as we approach our districts and schools with this. And so to begin, I think the most important thing is to honor the work that's already happening, honoring all the efforts, because that's important. And a lot of the times, as we're moving with so many like requirements and reporting and all the different things that we're having to do that can be seen as compliance, it's really hard to really feel like affirmed and validated and appreciated for the day-to-day work that we're doing. And so just really approaching with humility and honoring all of the work that we've done, that we're continuing to do, and then acknowledge the great things that are happening. So the high school success eligibility rubric changed, and so it shifted from the previous round, and so things are going to be different. And so if our systems didn't evolve with that new rubric, then it was going to be there was a higher chance that there was going to be some things that come up. And so just noting that there's this difference now. And so as we acknowledge all that, and then we move into shifting and changing, I think it's really like connecting back and in order for it to like resonate with their vision or with their strategy. And so what's in their strategic plan, what's in their vision, what are they moving towards? And if so, family integration is already part of their vision, of their core values, of the work that they're holding, then we're really not asking for more. We're just identifying like, oh, here's a space where we have room for growth to really strengthen our vision and our value that we hold with family partnerships. And so this is a place where we can improve. So it moves beyond that, like, well, ODE is telling me to do this and with compliance, but more of like, no, this is actually this is our own vision. This is something we truly believe. And so this is an opportunity for us to focus our efforts here and really look at our systems and see how we can level up, and we can really try to target that space, because through this eligibility review, we were able to identify that gap, right? So that's kind of the way that I would first approach. And again, that might not be relevant for every single district in every single situation. So maybe that wasn't helpful. um, and so maybe if you want to talk off the call and we can be a little bit more specific to the specific content of the districts, we could also do that as well.
Thank you very much for sharing. And yeah, no, I think we're good. Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate your comments, and we'll have more time to talk, I think, in the future.
Absolutely. Yes. All right. Well, I think we're at time, right? 1:45 is the time. We're 2 minutes over. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate everything that you've contributed. I hope this was helpful. If there's anything that I can do to support your district, and including visiting your site, please reach out to me.
Yep. And if you didn't get our address, or you think about it 2 months from now, you know where to find me, and I can connect you to Gloria and would be happy to do it. So Gloria, thank you so much for spending time with us in our first virtual in-service. It was really wonderful to have you here to share your knowledge, and we appreciate you very much.
It was a true honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I look forward to more opportunities for us to collaborate.
Me too. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye.